By the time the tow truck nosed onto Bramble Court, the sun had already turned the afternoon into a white-hot haze, the kind that warps air and judgment alike. Karen was in full regalia on the asphalt pearls, floral silk, a glossy handbag that looked louder than most sirens, blocking the nose of the county cruiser with her body, as if she owned the law because she owned a clipboard. She slapped a neon orange sticker on the cruiser's windshield that read violation in letters that screamed. "You will sell this ridiculous eyesore," she declared, loud enough for the block to hear, "and contribute to the amenity fund so we can replace our community's brand with something that glistens. We deserve a Lamborghini for appearances. Do you understand me, Sheriff?" She pronounced sheriff like it was a hobby and not a job that had saved more lives than she could imagine. Sheriff Darius Coltall, calm, uniform pressed as if it had been stitched with resolve, stood there with a paper cup sweating in his hand. The coffee he hadn't yet had a chance to drink after spending the entire morning tracking a missing 12-year-old through 3 counties and 3 miles of ravine. He didn't move. He let her words lie there in the heat, absurd and shiny as oil on water. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am," he said, voice even. The edge held in by years of training and a childhood full of rooms where he had learned to unlearn other people's panic. "This is county property. The HOA bylaws," she said, brandishing a stack of paper that had more staples than sense, "prohibit government paraphernalia parked on residential lanes longer than 15 minutes. That's been here 20. I timed it. You think your badge is special? It's the same as a pool pass. You follow the rules or you leave." Neighbors peeked between blinds like the whole cul-de-sac was a stage. Phones came up the way they do now, unanimous and hungry. Darius glanced at the orange sticker bleeding down his windshield and then at her face, which wore triumph the way some people wear sunscreen thick and everywhere. He thought about his mother telling him when he first put on a uniform, "Baby, some folks will never see your badge, only your skin. That's why you look them in the eye and make them see both." "Ma'am," he said, "you're obstructing an emergency vehicle. Step aside." "Emergency," she scoffed, a round sound, performative and practiced. "Your little errand can wait. We have brand standards." "Brand standards." She clicked her tongue like a metronome for foolishness. "You people come in here with your lights and your steel, scaring buyers and lowering comps. We work too hard to build this neighborhood. Sell the car, put the money into something aspirational, and maybe, I'll consider letting you keep your little job." She said it with a smile that implied mercy she didn't possess. The tow operator, a young man whose eyes darted between paycheck and conscience, stood near the rear of his truck like a kid in a thunderstorm. "Ma'am," he tried, "I can't tow a police. This lane is HOA jurisdiction." She cut in, and then to Darius, "See? Even he gets it. Tick-tock, Sheriff. I have a Lamborghini brochure in my car. Choose a color, or I file this." She tapped the stapled packet to the county ethics board and the state police. Imagine the scandal. First black sheriff in the county, and you can't even respect property values. The words hit how she wanted them, tow-barbed with insinuation and sanctimony. Darius felt them land but didn't let them root. He watched the tow driver twist his hat brim. He watched a neighbor, Mrs. Green, retired judge, brittle and brilliant, lift her phone higher. He watched a teenager, Livy with the camera always slung crossbody, move in tiny semicircles like a moon around a planet, capturing angles the truth would need later. "Step away," he repeated, and the kindness in it made the words heavier, not lighter. Karen refused. She took a step closer, so close her perfume leapt at him, sugary and insistent. "You'll sell it," she breathed, as if deals were made by breath alone. "You'll wire the funds to our amenity account. And I'll accept your apology by close of business." He didn't bother to explain that you cannot sell what belongs to the people, that patrol units are line items voted in public meetings she never attends, that ethics boards aren't toy boxes you rattle when you want a new car. He lifted his radio, not fast, not to startle, with the deliberate slowness of a man who knows his movements are always graded out of 10, and said, "Unit Cole requesting non-emergency assistance at Bramble Court. Possible obstruction of a marked unit. Requesting a community liaison and a watch commander." Karen laughed. "You calling your little friends? Adorable." I've already called the mayor's office and the news. We'll see who arrives first. She had. The world in Karen's phone moved quickly when the spotlight pointed at her. A white SUV stenciled with HOA security turned the corner like a bad joke. A man in a uniform that wasn't one gray shirt, shiny badge that would melt if it met a candle stepped out with a clipboard and the specific swagger of someone who wanted to be obeyed without earning it. "Ma'am?" He addressed Karen, not looking at Darius. "We got your call. This government vehicle is in violation of community standards and must be—" "Don't finish that sentence," Mrs. Green said from her porch, voice thin as paper and still somehow the sharpest object on the street. "Unless you want to add impersonation of law enforcement to the list." The man faltered. "I'm security." "You're a clipboard," she replied, and everyone heard the law degree under the powder blue cardigan. She looked to Darius. "You want me to call the county attorney?" "I've got it, Judge," he said. He didn't have to call her judge, but respect is like that given where it was earned because you want to, not because someone demands it. He took a breath. He could feel the neighborhood's pulsathredy, curious, some sympathetic, some not. He stepped to the side, let his body cam catch the scene like it was painting it, and then, because the line between patience and permission is thin, he leaned into the radio again. Also requesting a unit with dashcam to park opposite, to document towing attempt. Karen's eyebrows leapt. "Attempt? Oh no, darling. It's a decision. Ours. As in the homeowners." "You don't own me," he said. It wasn't loud, but it carried. For a beat, something like quiet principle moved across the lawn like a breeze that forgot to belong to anyone. The first county unit pulled up, its dashcam a square black eye that recorded without blinking. A community liaison woman named Sloan, kind and steel-threaded, stepped out and moved between Darius and Karen like a strand of thread looped between buttons to keep them from touching. "Ma'am," she said to Karen, "you can file a complaint if you believe there's a violation. You cannot apply enforcement to a law enforcement vehicle. And you cannot obstruct." "I can and I will," Karen insisted. "He's been parking here every time he visits that house on the corner. It looks tacky." Her arm shot toward the house he sometimes visited on his coffee break for 5 minutes because the elderly couple there liked to wave at cruisers and Mrs. Windsor always had leftover cinnamon rolls and a story about her days as a teacher who smuggled books into classrooms when the district ran short. Karen's finger cut the air. "He is leveraging his position to show off his government toy." "Ma'am," Sloan said, gentle and relentless. "He's visiting a resident." "I'm a resident," Karen said. Like that trumped everything. The tow driver shuffled backward, eyes apologizing to Darius without words. "I didn't know it was a police car when the call came in," he muttered. "The address said community complaint." "I can't." "You won't," Karen snapped. "You'll do your job." He looked at Darius, who looked back at him, two men bound by a line thrown over them by someone who had never stood where they stood. "What's your name?" Darius asked. "Ty." "Ty, thanks for coming out. You can stand down. If you're asked to tow a marked unit again, call my office. We'll get you something in writing you can show anyone who tries this." Ty looked relieved enough to float. He retreated to his truck. Karen pivoted on him. "You're losing my business," she threatened. He shrugged, small and brave. It didn't end there because people like Karen don't do endings, they do escalations. She followed Sloan to the sidewalk, rattling off demands and pronouncements. She called the news again. She dialed the mayor's assistant, who didn't pick up, and then the city manager, who did and told her to file an online complaint like everyone else. She hung up with a hiss that steamed. Then she turned and did what she had planned to do all along. You could see it in the way her shoulders squared and her chin found altitude. She pointed at Darius's body cam, dipped her voice into drama, and bleated into her phone. "He's threatening me. The sheriff is threatening me." Livy's camera caught everything, the unthreatening tone, the courteous distance, the way the only thing looming on that street was a woman's entitlement. Sloan kept her voice flat. "Ma'am, false reporting is a crime." Karen's face did a lightning storm of expression: shock, offense, the pressed violet of long-held grievance. "People like him," she spat, the words slipping like oil, Always get away with it. The words didn't just land. They planted flags. Darius watched the flagpoles, counted the angles, felt the edges. He looked not just at Karen but through her to a pattern he already recognized because it was older than anyone on that cul-de-sac. He knew what came next. He could write the script in his sleep. She'd file the complaint. She'd find the right phrases to ignite algorithms' abuse of power, intimidation, unprofessional, and fan them until they threatened to set a career on fire. She'd do interviews in nice lighting. She'd call herself a safety advocate. She would not say black unless she could do it in a way that sounded concerned and not contemptuous. She would push every button and wait for the machine to take over. He also knew something she didn't. He had receipts. Literal one-time-stamped dashcam logs, GPS pings, a bodycam file that was a symphony of patience. And other receipts to relationships, a neighborhood that mostly knew him because he treated everybody the same regardless of how they treated him. A retired judge who had watched every second and had nothing better to do than tell the truth in perfect sentences. There were other things in his pocket that looked like luck but were really design. He'd hired a reformer to run internal affairs. He'd invited the state attorney general's office to ride along last month. He'd put a copy of the whole policy manual online so anyone could read it and argue with it and understand exactly which rules existed and why. He had built his house on rock. Karen filed her complaint anyway. She didn't just file. She blitzed. She sent packets to the county ethics board, the state police, a radio station that loved to hate the sheriff because outrage paid better than ads. The packets included screenshots of the cruiser on Bramble Court with the neon sticker like a clown nose, which she insisted proved persistent flouting of homeowner standards and intentional brand tarnishment. She added an accusation that he had misused county gas funds by coming into the neighborhood for personal reasons. Attached a photo of him accepting a cinnamon roll through a screen door and circled it with a thick red marker like she was annotating a crime. She demanded his suspension pending investigation. She CC'd a luxury car dealership and, in a handwritten note on the cover letter, asked whether her HOA could expedite group pricing for a neighborhood Lamborghini as a key public-facing asset. She didn't know two things that mattered. The first, the HOA's amenity account was already under quiet review because the treasurer, Elliot, had called the county auditor after Karen told him if he didn't reclassify certain brand-building expenditures as safety infrastructure, she'd ruin his life. He'd been shaking when he made the call, voice pinched and urgent, and the auditor, Mr. Patel, a patient man who loved spreadsheets and fairness equally, had run the numbers and frowned at a black hole labeled outreach that looked suspiciously like ego. The second, the city manager she kept badgering, Angela Ruiz, had once interned at the sheriff's office, learned how the gears turned, and had no interest in letting an HOA president burn public trust like kindling. The investigation started within hours because Darius pushed for it. He didn't hide behind his badge. He pulled it wide open and invited sunlight. The county attorney scheduled interviews. Internal Affairs sent an email to his entire department. Cooperate fully, no spinning, no circling wagons. Sloan, whose job was to translate law into lay language without losing either along the way, delivered a neutral statement to the press that said nothing salacious and everything necessary. A complaint has been filed, footage is preserved, witnesses are being interviewed, outcomes will be shared. Karen's first interview ran at 10 p.m., her pearls gleaming like good intentions and her indignation pitched just right for the mic. "This is about safety and serenity," she crooned. "We are a luxury neighborhood. We don't need a constant police presence scaring our children." The host nodded solemnly, dragged a graphic across the screen that paired her name with an image of the cruiser, and teased the segment as shock claims against sheriff. At the same hour, a different video dropped. It didn't air on television. It lived online, where truth tends to run faster because it doesn't carry commercial breaks. Livy posted the bodycam angles, the dashcam, the iPhone footage she had stitched together on a laptop with stickers of bands and planets. She didn't add commentary because the footage didn't need any. It showed Karen blocking the cruiser, the neon sticker, the tow truck's arrival, the HOA security badge that reflected light but not legitimacy. The exact moment Karen craned her neck to fit the word threatening into a sentence that did not want it. It showed Darius asking her to step aside in the same tone he used to order coffee. Mrs. Green shared it to her book club, which had more retired prosecutors than most courthouses. The video made it to a local forum. It then made it to everywhere. Karen called it edited. She called it out of context. Then the sheriff's office released the full body cam, uncut, with a time code that ate any argument alive. The next morning, Elliot slid into the county building with his shoulders rounded and a folder hugged to his chest. Mr. Patel met him in a quiet conference room, poured him water, and listened as Elliot confessed about the amenity fund. "She wants to buy a car," he said, the words tumbling out like marbles. "She calls it a community flagship, like a mascot, like how some stores have a giant inflatable gorilla. A Lamborghini, Mr. Patel. She wants a Lamborghini. She told me to reclassify it as a promotional safety vehicle that chases away criminal vibes. She said if I didn't sign, she'd tell everyone I stole. She said she'd have the sheriff fired if he got in the way." She laughed when she said it. Patel opened the folder, looked at spreadsheets, receipts for catered board mixers labeled as fence reinforcement, and a $7,800 floral arrangement retitled perimeter concealment. He breathed in long and slow and felt just a stir like a kettle just starting to sing. "Thank you," he told Elliot. "You did the right thing." At noon, the county attorney's office held a press briefing on the courthouse steps. Reporters gathered like gulls near a fishing boat. Darius stood to the side with Sloan, hat in his hand like his grandfather taught him when standing on someone else's porch. Angela Ruiz stood with them, jaw set, eyes on the future like a surveyor marking stakes. Mrs. Green watched from the front row, cane across her knees like a courtroom gavel. The attorney MS. Devin Clark, who had a way of making words stand upright and behave, stepped to the mic. "We've evaluated the complaint against Sheriff Cole," she announced. "We find no misconduct. In fact, the evidence supports that Sheriff Cole acted with restraint in the face of provocation." She let that breathe, then continued, "We are opening a separate investigation into false reporting, extortion, attempted fraud, and unauthorized assumption of public authority by individuals associated with the Bramble Court Homeowners Association." That was the moment the sky changed. Not in color but in weight. The neighborhood felt it. Power shifting back into the hands of people who had never wanted it in the first place but had always deserved its protection. Karen felt it too. She arrived late like a bomb with a bow, stilettos biting at the courthouse stairs. Mic already on, statement already memorized. She opened her mouth to say she was being targeted for being a woman who cares about standards, but Elliot stepped forward faster, heart in his throat and truth pouring out. "She tried to force me to move money," he said, voice shaking but legible. "For a car. For a Lamborghini. She said we'd call it a safety vehicle and keep it in the clubhouse. She threatened me. She said she'd burn the sheriff's career if he didn't play along." Karen turned to him with a smile built like a blade. "Oh, Elliot," she trilled. "Don't be dramatic. It was aspirational." "It was illegal," Miss Clark said without looking at Karen. "And it ends today." The charges didn't fall like bricks. They stacked slowly, properly, like a wall you can lean on. False reporting, attempted coercion, interference with a public servant, conspiracy to misuse HOA funds. A subpoena to the Lamborghini dealership that made the salesperson cough out an email thread where Karen called the car our neighborhood's crown and joked about hiring a driver with a badge vibe. Karen went white, then red, then something blotchy that had no name. Her lawyer, who had the eyes of a man who could see a hill he was about to die on, tried to tug her away from the cameras. She resisted because the crowd had been her mirror and she didn't know how to walk past one without performing. She faced Darius, chin up to that same old altitude. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over. There are people who don't want you in that uniform. I know them. I'm friends with them." He nodded once, a movement that contained a decade. "I know them too," he said. "They do not sign my paycheck. The people do." When the hearing came, the courtroom was a gallery of everyday faces: teachers, EMTs, a tow driver named Ty who had taken the afternoon off, Kids who had seen too many videos of the wrong people getting punished for the right things and needed to watch something go the way it should. Mrs. Green testified delicately and thoroughly. The law clicked into place around her like a tailor-made suit. Elliot produced exhibits. Patel spoke about numbers like they were characters with motives. Sloan explained policy in a way that made the jurors' pens pause mid-scratch as understanding settled in. Livy's video played, and the room was so quiet you could hear a throat clear in the hallway. Karen took the stand and performed. She blamed stress. She blamed a culture of disrespect. She blamed growing crime. A foggy phrase she waved like incense, trying to make people cough. She cried without tears. She said the word safety so many times it lost meaning. She never said the word black. Not once. The closest she came was certain optics. And the closest the jury came to patience was the look they gave each other that said, in private language, enough. The verdict was clean. Guilty on false reporting. Guilty on attempted coercion. Guilty on interfering with a public servant. Not guilty on one narrow count of fraud because the check had never been cut. But the judge added restitution tied to wasted public resources and fees Elliot had advanced under duress. Community service was mandated. Not the photo-friendly kind, but the quiet, repetitive kind where you show up when nobody's watching and do work that doesn't post nicely. A restraining order barred her from contacting Darius, Sloan, Elliot, or Ty. The court recommended the HOA board resign and appointed an interim receiver, Mr. Patel, with a wry-kind Smilito, shepherd the association back to its basic job. Fixing fences, paying the light bill, and staying out of careers you don't understand. Karen's face upon sentencing wasn't a mask anymore. It was a mirror she couldn't bear to look into. She didn't learn the lesson in the instant because people like her change in inches, if at all, and mostly when the inches come with a cost. But there was a specific small mercy in the judge's voice when she said, "You can be better than this if you choose." It sat there like a life ring that Karen could reach for or ignore. The neighborhood's tension unwound over weeks like a spool that had been too tight for too long. Someone painted a long wooden sign and staked it in the community garden near the mailbox cluster. A sign with words that looked like they'd been written by a careful hand. Karen versus Sheriff, truth wins. It wasn't cruel. It was a marker like a cairn on a trail that says, we passed this way. We won't lose ourselves again. Darius didn't celebrate loudly because grace isn't noisy. He ordered a box of cinnamon rolls from Mrs. Windsor, and he and Sloan carried them door to door as part of a neighborhood meet and greet that was really just an excuse to be seen doing what they always did. Showing up, listening, making sure everyone knew which numbers to call when things felt wrong. He took a picture not for the press but for his mother standing with Mrs. Green, her cane planted like a flagpole, Livy making bunny ears behind them because she was still a kid and the world hadn't wrung play out of her yet. When the story inevitably spread beyond the county line because the internet is a river that carries both the poison and the cure, there were columns and comment threads and folks who insisted it had to be fake because justice like that doesn't happen. But it did. Not because the world is suddenly different but because a few humans decided to be exactly what their roles demanded. A sheriff who understood his power is for service not spectacle, a neighbor who used her camera to hold a mirror, a judge who remembered that law without wisdom is just ink, a treasurer who chose the frightening right over the comfortable wrong, an auditor who saw that math is moral if you let it be. If there was a bitter taste left anywhere, it didn't come from the cinnamon. It came from the knowledge that this story wasn't remarkable because it happened, but because of how often it doesn't. For every Bramble court that gets the arc, there are 10 where footage is edited the other way and PowerPoints its finger and wins. Darius knew that better than anyone. It's why he kept the body cam on, why he kept his tone level, why he kept both his courtesy and his spine. He can't make the world fair with one good day, but he can stack good days like bricks until you can build a house. A month later, during the first cool evening of the fall, the sheriff's office hosted a small cookout at the park beside the elementary school. No banners. No speeches. Kids ran under the trees with popsicles that stained their tongues wild colors. Someone brought a speaker that played Motown and somebody else taught an anti-line dance that made even the shy neighbors stomp. Ty grilled like a man who knew smoke as language. Elliot laughed with Mr. Patel in a way that some people would call relief and others would call redemption. Karen didn't attend. Her lawyer had advised her to limit public appearances to community service shifts and therapy. Sometimes fairness requires absence as much as presence. Darius stood by the picnic table, hat tucked under his arm, watching a little boy in a superhero t-shirt climb the jungle gym and shout, "Watch me!" the way kids do when they want you to see them try. He thought about the cruiser, about neon stickers and people who mistake brightness for righteousness. He thought about the emails on his desk that would still be there in the morning patrol schedules, a grant application for trauma-informed training, a recommendation letter for a deputy who'd done the quiet hero work nobody writes stories about. He thought about his mother, who would call tonight to ask whether he ate enough and whether he's sleeping and whether he remembers to forgive himself for not being everywhere for everyone. Sloane bumped his shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "You?" She nodded at the line of kids waiting to take pictures with the K-9 who tolerated celebrity like a saint. "This helps." She pointed her chin toward the street where someone had parked a vintage convertible, blue as a swimming pool. "You know," she teased, "if the HOA needs an aspirational vehicle, I could be convinced." He smiled. "You're incorrigible." "Correct." They watched the sun slide down the backs of the houses. They watched the sky learn purple slowly. The world felt possible in that way it feels when people are together without agenda. It didn't fix anything. It didn't have to. It just reminded them what fixing is for. When darkness finally walked in and asked for the music to turn down, they packed up slowly, with that reluctance you only feel when what you're leaving has been gentle. Darius carried the folded tables to the truck with Ty. Mrs. Green hugged him in the brittle careful way of a woman who knows her bones and refuses to apologize for them. Livy handed him a zip drive with all the footage neatly organized in folders labeled with dates and because she is who she is tiny doodles of stars. On his way home, Darius paused on Bramble Court. The houses were asleep, lights set to timers like choreographed eyelids. He parked, turned off the engine, and sat a minute. The wooden sign near the mailbox leaned in the grass. Karen versus Sheriff Truthwins. He got out, straightened it so it stood square, and brushed dirt off the bottom edge. He looked up at the night, at a slice of moon that looked like someone had taken a bite. He thought, not for the first time, that justice is less a hammer than a garden. It takes patience. It takes repetition. It takes getting your hands dirty while knowing you might not be there when things bloom. He slid back behind the wheel and drove off. The cruiser made its soft mechanical murmurs, a familiar reminder that some machines exist not to shine, but to serve. His radio popped with a call about a stray dog near a storm drain. He turned left, already heading toward the small thing that would be big to someone. Somewhere behind him, a woman was learning or not learning a lesson. Somewhere ahead, a kid would sleep easier because the dog would go home. Somewhere in the middle, he kept doing the work that makes those summers somersault into a we. That is the story of a day that could have gone the other way but didn't, because enough people said no to the easy wrong and yes to the hard right. Maybe that doesn't make headlines as loudly as a Lamborghini would have. But it lasts longer. And if you've read this far, tell me, where do you stand on what happened on Bramble Court? Who was right? Who was wrong? And what would justice look like on your street?